Welcome back to Apple Weekly. This past week was once again a very eventful one as we got the public release of iOS 16.0.3 and another new beta of iOS 16.1. So in this episode, we're going to talk about both of those software updates and also give an update on my horrendous experience with battery drain, as you guys saw in last weekend's episode. And then after discovering the software, we're going to discuss what new Apple products are coming this month, why iPhone 14 Plus sales are lower than expected, some insane details on the upcoming Apple mixed reality headset, and more. And as always, if you want to stay updated with all things Apple, make sure to click that subscribe button down below so you don't miss next week's episode. All right, so let's start off by talking about iOS 16.1 and this fifth beta. So this beta just seems more like a maintenance type of update to kind of polish up the software before the RC build gets released, which could be next week. We'll talk about that near the end of this video, but there's really not too much going on here with the fifth beta. So we do have one change that I did not get into the specifics on in my previous What's New video. So this has to do with workout modes while in low power mode. So there is a new alert that says this workout was recorded in low power mode with fewer GPS and heart rate readings. Some metrics may be unavailable. So just a new pop-up here in 16.1 in the fifth beta. And then we have to talk about something that I cannot believe slipped through the cracks at Apple, and that is that the new crash detection feature in the iPhone 14s and the new Apple Watches is actually being triggered and calling emergency services while users are on roller coasters. So I cannot believe this slipped through the cracks. I mean, it was a very predictable thing that could have happened. And I think the way that Apple is going to mitigate this is basically just by having, the way I would think is just by using GPS. So if something happens, if that motion happens while in the vicinity of a theme park, it's not going to activate or trigger crash detection. Otherwise, it will. And you can see that these theme parks are even putting up signs now talking about this feature and informing users what could be happening. So this has not been fixed yet as of 16.1 beta 5 or iOS 16.0.3, but I would assume it will be fixed pretty soon because that's a pretty big issue. And then we have to talk about another issue that seems to be going on with every single iOS version ever since iOS 13, and that is that applications are able to bypass your VPN connection. And this time with iOS 16, it's Apple-specific applications. So some iOS developers on Twitter discovered that most Apple applications on iOS 16 will send data that bypasses a VPN connection. So the apps that leaked data were the Apple Store, Clips, Files, Find My, Health, Maps, Settings, and Wallet. And yes, this user did also test this on Android as well and saw the same result. So it's not necessarily an iOS specific issue. It's happening on Android as well, but it is something that you should be aware of. And the only way around this and the only way to make sure that your data doesn't leak through a VPN is to use a router-based VPN, like set up a VPN on your router. So there does not appear to be a way for on-device VPNs to actually force, the VPN connection on Apple-specific applications. It's going to have to come from your router. I can't wait to see what the VPN leak issue is with iOS 17, because I swear every single time there's an iOS version, a new iOS version, there's a new kind of VPN leak for data getting through a VPN service. And speaking of next year, there was also an interesting rumor I wanted to talk about regarding iMessage. So according to Majin Buu on Twitter, Apple could completely redesign iMessage next year with iOS 17. So he says that it could have new home, chat rooms, video clips, and new chat features in AR. It should be released next year along with the new headset. And we're going to talk about that headset here in a little bit, but this is pretty interesting. Now, I don't know how credible this is. Of course, it is a rumor, so take it with a grain of salt, but I would not be surprised to see Apple make some big changes to messages next year because it has been long overdue. We've really just got really small quality of life features, like the unsend and the edit was long overdue, but it's not like a massive change. So I think this is a possibility, but of course it's way too early to tell just yet. Apple has also recently announced their plans to turn Apple Daily Cash that you earn from the Apple Card into a high-yield savings account. So Apple said this: in the coming months, Apple Card users will be able to open the new high-yield savings account and have their daily cash automatically deposited into it with no fees, no minimum deposits, and no minimum balance requirements. So they do go on to say that you will be able to deposit additional funds into that savings account, and you can withdraw at any time without a fee. So that's going to be great for me. I have a lot of money sitting there in my daily cash just because I never use it. So it will be nice to make money on the money that's just sitting there. So they have not revealed the percentage yet. We don't know if it's going to be like 2%, 2.5% or higher. We don't know just yet. And of course that will change, over time, but this is expected to come soon. All right, so going back to iOS 16.1 beta 5, we need to mention some of the bugs that are still occurring here in this 5th beta, because I honestly do not think that we are ready for prime time yet. We have a B at the end of the build number. It should be performing better than this. We should have more bugs patched up by now, but there are still several issues. And the first one is when you pull down the control center, you can see we have that bug there with the HomeKit devices where it kind of just glitches out and appears like a second late. There's a little delay there. That is still going on. That was there in beta 4 as well. We also have an issue with the shutdown sound not working every time. The boot up sound works every time on the 14, but sometimes the shutdown sound does not work at all. But a much more annoying bug than those two is where when you switch off a focus mode, it changes your wallpaper on the lock screen and the home screen to just an all black wallpaper. So you can see right here, this is a screen recording I took earlier today, and you can see it switched to an all black wallpaper after I exited out of a focus mode. So I can go into this one and it works just fine. Then when I go back over here, you'll see it flash for a second of the wallpaper that's supposed to be there, but it's not. And then if I go into my settings and go to the wallpaper section, you can see that's what the wallpaper should be, but it's just all black. So that is a very annoying bug that needs to be patched. That's been going on for a while now. I'm really surprised that Apple has not fixed it, but I would expect that to be fixed pretty soon. At least I would hope so before the final version. But at least we do have a fix for the CarPlay mic sensitivity issue. So a lot of people that were complaining about the CarPlay issues say that those issues have been resolved with beta 5, along with iOS 16.0.3, which went out to the public this past week. But as far as the performance and battery life goes, performance is really not that much better than beta 4. I think it is better than iOS 16, the first initial release, and the point updates that came after it. So you will see a nice boost in performance from those versions. But as far as beta 4 to beta 5, really not a big difference. The Geekbench scores were pretty good though. So everything is, pretty solid in terms of performance. I really cannot see any more improvements coming even after the final version. We're going to have to wait probably till 16.2, 16.3 to get further performance improvements because it's pretty solid so far. And then for the battery life, I'm sure you guys saw my video last weekend's episode of Apple Weekly. I talked about how the battery life was so bad. The battery drain was horrendous on beta 4 on my main device, my iPhone 14 Pro, along with my 14 Pro Max, my iPad. Everything had battery drain issues on the previous beta, but I can say that it has been resolved. My battery seems to be back to normal now on this 5th beta. And here's a look at my battery usage chart on the 10-day view. So you can see last week on beta 4, I went over 150% almost every single day of the week. And you can see here with beta 5, I only hit 150% one time. So that is good. Of course, Monday is when the update came out. So Tuesday and Wednesday, you could see far below the usage or the battery percentage used as on beta 4. So even the graph shows a solid difference in battery life. And then as far as iOS 16.0.3 goes, this is the latest public release. This was pushed out to all devices earlier this week, and it does fix up some of these bugs, which you can read right here. Now, Apple mentioned in the release notes that these are pretty much all for the iPhone 14, aside from the mail crash bug down at the bottom, but a lot of users have reported that these issues were going on their iPhone 13, their 12, their 11, all devices. So Apple mentions the 14s here, but if you're having these issues on other devices, expect them to be fixed for you as well, because multiple people have told me that their issues with like low mic volume on CarPlay have been fixed, and it's not just for the iPhone 14. But all in all, it's a pretty solid update. You're probably not going to lose any performance or battery life, so you're pretty safe to update to 16.0.3 if you're not running the betas right now. And then let's talk about what's coming next for Apple. So next up is going to be another iOS 16.1 beta, which is going to be next week on the week of the 17th. Now, I think that this very well could be the RC build. So it's going to come most likely on the 18th. Apple has been loving those Tuesday releases, so we could see that on the 18th. And again, it will either be a beta 6 or an RC. So my guess is RC, and I think the final release will be on the week of the 24th, if not on the 24th, right on the dot right there. So we can expect to see iPadOS 16 and macOS Ventura that week as well, the week of the 24th. So Mark Gurman did mention that they could be released on that week as well. That was my original prediction, and that could in fact happen. I think the week of the 31st is the very latest that we'll see 16.1, the final release. And then also, like I mentioned previously, do not be surprised when we get a 16.2 beta that same week or the week after. All right, so now let's move on to the latest Apple news. And let's start with the Apple products that we could expect to see over the next couple weeks. So as we've discussed in previous episodes, the October event is no longer happening. And now Mark Gurman is expecting some new products to be released via press release. So what are those products? Well, a new MacBook Pro, a new Mac Mini, a new Apple TV, and new iPads. Starting with the new MacBook Pro, we are not expecting any major changes to the design, just the internals, just the performance. So this one is expected to pack the powerful M2 Pro and M2 Max chips and offer substantial improvements over the M2 and M1 Pro and Max chips. So Bloomberg is reporting that the new M2 Pro and M2 Max chips will focus predominantly on improved graphics performance. So Macworld did share some predictions as well, so we can, kind of see what to expect from these chips. So here are the predictions. The M2 Pro up to a 10-core CPU and up to 20-core GPU and up to 48 gigs of RAM. And the M2 Max chip is expected to have up to 10-core CPU, 40-core GPU, and up to 96 gigabytes of RAM. That is complete overkill, and I love it. The Mac Mini is also expected to carry the same design as the 2020 model while packing the M2 and M2 Pro chips. So no M2 Max is expected for the Mini, which is understandable given its affordable price tag. The M2 Pro version of this Mac Mini is codenamed J474 and has 8 performance cores and 4 efficiency cores. So expect some nice performance gains over the 2020 model. As for the Apple TV, we could actually see 2 different models this year. So Ming-Chi Kuo previously reported that Apple is preparing a cheaper Apple TV to, quote, close the gap with competitors. But Bloomberg reported that Apple is planning to release a new Apple TV with the A14 chip inside. So we could actually see 2 different versions of the Apple TV this month. And then we're also expecting a new iPad and iPad Pro. Now, the entry-level iPad, the iPad 10th generation, is expected to be the most exciting one of the bunch because we might finally be seeing the long overdue redesign. So here's what we could see on that 10th gen iPad: a new flat edge design with no home button and smaller bezels, Touch ID on the power button, similar to the iPad Air and iPad Mini, a repositioned FaceTime camera located on the right side rather than on the top, Lightning port being replaced with USB-C, 5G support for cell connectivity, and the A14 Bionic chip. So that A14 chip is what's going to differentiate that from, of course, the iPad Air. So it's going to be cheaper due to that chip being in there. And then the iPad Pro is expected to have that same M2 chip with a larger glass Apple logo on the back that's going to support wireless charging. So that'll be pretty interesting to see. So hopefully we see all of these products via press release later this month. It would be really cool to see a back-to-back release like we've seen in the past, where Apple releases like a new product every day. That is super exciting, so I would not mind that at all. And then speaking of new products, the iPhone 14 Plus just launched a couple weeks back, and it appears that the sales are already lower than expected. And I can tell you right now, I don't think expectations were even very high, so that's saying something. So according to a report from DigiTimes, total iPhone 14 model shipments will likely be around the same as those for the iPhone 13 lineup last year, despite everyone being so excited and gravitating towards the 14 Pro and Pro Max. So I don't know, does this mean that the Mini has a chance to come back? I sure hope so. And then moving a little bit further out, let's talk about Apple's upcoming AR/VR headset, mixed reality headset, whatever it's going to end up being called. So this headset might include iris scanning biometrics to switch user accounts and authenticate payments, according to a report from The Information. So these integrated iris sensors would allow the headset to detect who's wearing it by scanning their eyes as it's being put on, and it's going to automatically log in to that correct user's account. That is insane. That is going to be so awesome. And it's also reportedly going to allow a user with glasses, like if you wear glasses, they're going to be able to be magnetically attached inside of the headset so that you never need to worry about taking them off. So the headset is expected to be much lighter than the Meta headset, which just got announced this past week, and it's still on track for a 2023 release. Now the price is still unknown, but we're still hearing rumors in that $2,000 to $3,000 range. And for comparison, Meta's new Quest Pro headset has a price tag of $1,500. So Apple's could literally be double the cost. So not cheap by any means, but that is the Apple tax we pay. And I'm still always curious, are you guys actually interested in an AR VR headset? Let me know in a comment down below, because I am, but I'm also like a mega nerd who's really into stuff like that. So I'm really curious to see if you guys are actually into that or not. Let me know in a comment down below, and along with why. Like, what are you looking forward to in this headset besides gaming? Because I think gaming is the #1 answer, but aside from that, what are you looking for in this headset? So there you have it. That is the latest batch of Apple news from this past week, along with some updates on the latest iOS 16 changes. Hope you guys enjoyed this video, this episode. As always, if you did, I would appreciate if you give it a thumbs up. Also, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss next week's episode. But anyways, guys, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you soon.